O holy child of Bethlehem, descend to us, we pray. Cast out our sin and enter in. Be born in us today. We hear the Christmas angels, the great glad tidings tell. O come to us, abide with us, our Lord, Emmanuel. You may be seated. I don't know if it's just me, but as I've gotten older, I've realized that gift giving has become more tricky in my life. Figuring out what someone wants, it's hard enough. Figuring it out in the appropriate side makes it harder, even though what you really know is that person likely already has everything that he or she needs, and let's be honest, most of us have most that we want. I'm 47, so I get dad gifts, but even those are tricky for a guy like me because I wear this plastic thing around my neck. So I've cut off a major dad gift giving artery for my kids, the necktie. And so now they're forced to be exceptionally inventive in the sock department. And you can't see that, but they did pretty good here tonight. There you go. In my life, I've received, probably like you, all kinds of gifts. I've received dream gifts and fun gifts and thoughtful gifts and awkward gifts and even concerning gifts. I'll tell you what I mean. Imagine me at 19, I'm in college. Way back then, it was the era of the grunge music, like Nirvana and Pearl Jam and that sort of thing. And never been cool, but I, at the time, thought I actually fit into all of that. And so my Aunt Gwen decides she's going to give me a gift. Can't wait to see what it is. I open it up, and it's a bright turquoise turtleneck. That's right, my Aunt Gwen gave me a bright turquoise turtleneck for Christmas when I was 19. And so I opened this thing up, and I was surprised by the gift. And I said, is this for me? And she smiled really big. Yes, it's for you. And that's where this gift became concerning. But because I wondered, what was it that my Aunt Gwen was seeing in me and my wardrobe that thought that the one thing that was really lacking was this turquoise turtleneck? Now, if you have a turquoise turtleneck, please do not take any offense. I'm sure you can pull it off. But I hope you can appreciate that at age 19, I couldn't. I still can't, I don't think. But Aunt Gwen somehow saw that turquoise turtleneck in the store, and she immediately thought, Eric. And at 19, that was disconcerting to Eric. Assuming, it just had to be my Aunt Gwen, I reached for another gift from Aunt Joyce, burgundy turtleneck. At this point, kind of the alarm bells are going off, not because there's anything wrong with the turtleneck, but because I couldn't figure out why my family thought that my wardrobe exclusively needed an array of them. I was scared to open any other gift that Christmas. Convinced that, maybe my cousins were going to tell me something about myself I didn't know, and it was going to be a pack of cigarellos and a map to the Greyhound racetrack across the river, where apparently my family thought I would spend my days in my many, many turtlenecks. Gift giving is hard. The most unintentionally cruel gift that I ever received was a book. And I didn't mean it at all. In fact, it's a very popular book. I think it remains one, in fact. And it's the book where the red fern grows. I don't know who gave me this book, probably Best, or why that person thought that book would spread holiday cheer into my 8-year-old life. But now, if you don't know this book, I'll try to tell it to you without ruining it for any kids that are here, because my wife's a teacher, and unbelievably, they're still tormenting children with this thing today. So this impoverished farm boy, he toils for months to buy his dream, 2 red-bone coonhound dogs. Only to have one, and I'm going to use some euphemisms here for the kids, only to have one succumb 2 lacerations from a mountain lion, followed by the other meeting her Waterloo by means of self-imposed malnourishment caused out of deep grief. So this is the story this person thought I needed at 8. And I'll tell you, at 8 years old, the fate of those 2 dogs, old Dan, little Ann, it broke my heart. I remember reading the last line of that book. My heart smashed to pieces, and walking downstairs to my parents, I was sobbing, probably slobbering, smashed, just a mess, and desperately hoping that my parents could somehow take this pain away. And I scared them to death, of course. And I looked at them so they could help, and there was nothing, of course, they could do. After all, they didn't know this story. They didn't know old Dan, how much he loved life. They didn't know little Ann, how she was so smart and spry. They didn't know those precious dogs. And so they couldn't really know my distress. That is, they didn't know until I suggested that we read that book on a family vacation, and then they knew. Then they knew really well. In fact, I bet if you saw my family that day, we were quite a sight. Rolling down some highway in sunny Florida, all 5 of us bawling our eyes out over those 2 dogs. Now, I read that book, Where the Red Fern Grows, 13 times during my childhood. I don't know what that says about me, but it is true. I read that book over and over and over again, and at the time, I really wasn't sure why, but I somehow felt called back to this book somehow. And so I would reluctantly pick it up once again, and I would expectantly read through it once again, but inevitably, it would break my heart all over again. But I couldn't give it up, and I know I should have, but I couldn't, and I think it's because I wanted that dreadful ending to change. I was desperate for a different conclusion to the story. And so somehow, oddly enough, I was hopeful that if I would just read through it one more time, somehow some things would change. But of course, the story never changed, because that's just how the story went. The story is the story. The end is the end. And you can read it over and over and over again, but it's always and forever going to be the same. If all of us who have walked in here tonight are anything like the folks that I've been encountering over the last several years, there's a really good portion of us that are looking at the world about us, at all the storylines that are playing out in our news and in our national dialogue, in our political discourse, in our interactions over social media, even within our very families. And we're looking all of that and the trajectory of all these storylines in our lives, and they seem out of control and somehow already set and in no good way. And many are tempted to think that we're just along for a ride to a conclusion that we don't have any say over. Moreover, undoubtedly some have come in here tonight struggling with very personal storylines within, your own life. Private struggles that seem to suggest that the ending is somehow already set for you. And you also are just kind of cruelly along for a ride to a conclusion that won't or just can't change. And I say all that not to be dark on a night that could easily be a respite from all of that, but because I really 100% believe that what was set in motion this night 2 millennia ago, that is the antidote to this world's bad endings. See, Christmas is not just about shepherds with lambs and big-eyed cows and a straw-stuffed manger. It's about something more than fancy socks for Dad, as great as those are, or toys for kids, or foods with too much starch in them, which, let's be honest, are the best types of food. It's really about a God who read the story of human life over and over and over again, and like me with that book, hated the way the story ended. We consider the familiar gospel passage that David just read for us. From one perspective, this little peasant family, Mary and Joseph, they're captive, like maybe some of you might feel, to this world's storylines over which they have zero control. The gospel starts with the most powerful Roman emperor of all time, Caesar Augustus, setting the plot lines for them with his decrees. As it is, according to the rules of the stories of this world, he gets to say what their story is going to be. He says what their beginning, their middle, and their endings will be. And when you look at all of that from most angles, Mary and Joseph are just along for a ride. As we heard, literally, they were told what to do, and so they went and did it. And yet what only a select, humble, poor few could see is that there was also a God reading that same story, but not bound by that story's rules. In fact, this God was reading all the plot lines of all of human life over and over and over again. And as I said before, God hated the way those stories were ending. The stories of humanity that universally at the beginning seemed so promising, but they didn't end the way that God wanted them to. And so God decided to enter the story and change it from the inside out. God decided on this night that that ending just couldn't keep happening, and that's why we're here. Not for escape, not for any retreat from reality, but rather for a new plot line to life. We're here quite simply because God got sick of the way the story ended. We're here because that broke God's heart, and so God decided to change it forever. And so God came and was born into even your very real human story. God lived our life so that our lives and our stories and our endings might change. That's why we're here tonight, to celebrate a God who hated the ending so much that he came close and gave us the greatest gift ever, God's very self. And that's why in Jesus we finally have that gift that we really wanted, even though we never even knew to ask for it. Would have never had the audacity to ask for it. As surprising as a turquoise turtleneck, I assure you, but in a good way. It is the gift of Emmanuel, a word that literally means the with us God. And this with us God is the answer to humanity's bad endings. Emmanuel, the gift from God of God that will change that awful end. And so we celebrate this God who couldn't take it anymore and thus refused to stay put. A God who read your story and mine over and over and over again and decided it just had to change. And because God did, now the story's not just the story. Now the end's not just the end. In fact, I would encourage you to take enough heart that you could muster the strength to reread the story of your life just one more time. Because guess what? As of tonight, the ending just changed. Amen.